We still don't get paid what I believe we're worth.
I had secretly been wanting to try health coaching.
Women have been dropping out.
Your body is the next frontier of liberation.
You have to monetize. We buy into this idea that anyone can do this.
Your body becomes proof.
Whether or not we're trying to sell a service or a product, all women are brands.
Now I'm a health coach.
My name is Kyla Tova, and this is Your Body, Your Brand. Episode 1, The Ouroboros.
When I started my business, it was hard. It's hard to have a business. It's hard to have a client-focused business. It takes time, and it takes a lot of self-growth. So at the beginning, I was looking for a lot of guidance, and I hired lots of different coaches. And I was sort of fed that message of like, there's 3 industries. There's money and relationships and health.
In 2012, just weeks after I got my first job in marketing, I discovered internet business. I was, at the time, recovering from an eating disorder, orthorexia and exercise addiction, which was eventually diagnosed as anorexia. I had left graduate school to recover, spending a few years in retail until I realized that I'd need a better salary if I wanted to move out of my mother's house and start my own life. It was a time of change and growth and discovery. I was vulnerable and impressionable, and I was desperately searching for answers. I was also immediately aware of the fact that while my salaried marketing job was a coup, it was also not forever. And that was when I listened to my first podcast about internet business. I started to hear the message everywhere. There's an entire world full of people who were frustrated with the rat race, or inequality in the workplace, or lack of creativity or trust or growth from their employers. There was an entire world of people who were living their #best lives and who wanted to help and inspire others to live their #best lives too. All it took was one big idea, one big break, one unique, impactful, and undeniable brand, and I could be free. Free to finally build a life for myself without the stress of a 9-to-5 job and the demands of an overpaid CEO and the fear that my life was meaningless. But I'd need a brand. And to build a brand, I'd need a business. And to build that business, all I'd need was my body. Like me, you may have been dieting your whole life. You may have been dieting for so long you don't even know what life looks like when you aren't restricting food groups or counting calories. You may still believe that calories in, calories out is a legitimate mantra by which to live your life. You may still be bought into the idea that your calorie or macro counting isn't a diet, it's a lifestyle. Like me, you've probably been at war with food in your body for so long that you just assume it's normal to feel conflicted about what you put in your mouth, or to feel like you need to atone for eating. It's just a part of the culture. It's just something everyone does. But, and I'm either about to blow your mind or else just say the thing you know but you've been trying to deny, dieting is not normal. It's average, but it's not normal. It's not a genetic predisposition. It's not a thing that humans have always done. Children are dieting younger and younger. There are statistics about children, mostly girls, as young as 5 years old who are actively dieting. It's not because they want to or because, like play, it's part of the human developmental experience. It's not, even though it's been normalized for so long that it seems normal. Children are dieting because they see it modeled by the adults in their lives, and the adults in their lives are dieting because it's been pushed in marketing for the last century at least. First in paper advertisements like magazines, later on TV and radio, and now, of course, in blog posts, Facebook ads, Instagram posts, Twitter DMs, you name it. But dieting isn't normal. Obsessive exercise isn't normal. And yet, everyone I know is on a diet or talking about their next exercise program like it's the answer to all of life's problems. And a lot of people are choosing to get paid for that belief. And the reason they're making that choice? Well, they do get paid for it.
So, obviously I'm working with bodies, so that falls into health, right? So So then you look at, okay, well, what are the health challenges that people have? And the way it was framed for me was like, okay, you sell people on what they want, and then you get them in and you do this like magical transformation with them. And, you give them all the growth stuff that you have. Because, most of us coaches are doing this not necessarily because we want to see a bunch of skinny bodies walking around or whatever our thing is that we're coaching for, but because we really want people to grow and be happier and healthier people. And that didn't work for me because it felt like a bait and switch, and I wasn't getting people who were, people would come in and I'd be like, yeah, but there's all this growth stuff. And they'd be like, yeah, but how do I get skinny?
That's Suki Baxter, a radical body worker who started out in Rolfing. Rolfing is an intense and systemized style of bodywork, and people used to come to her looking for movement, with the belief that movement would lead to weight loss, not the belief that movement would lead to better mobility. In this episode, I want to give you some context for this podcast about the world we're living in and the mindsets we're dealing with before we jump into the discussion of how this mindset, combined with systemic problems in today's working world, is influencing women identifying people specifically to drop out of corporate jobs and sell their body image. I don't want to assume that you're done with dieting or that you've embraced body positivity. I don't want to assume that you've left behind body positivity in pursuit of social justice and fat acceptance. In fact, I don't want to assume that you're anywhere on your journey other than where you are. And for most of us, that means you're mired in the messaging that our bodies and other bodies are not enough and too much. To that end, we're going to talk to several coaches like Suki who have faced the pervasive diet message about where it came from and why we need to overcome it.
I, like many girls and women, have spent the majority of my life obsessing about my appearance, but specifically my weight. And, it kept me from doing a shit ton of stuff. It just kept me from living my life. And, I got to this point where I started to have these thoughts that this can't be it. Like this idea of going on a diet or some sort of weight loss plan several times a year, like just this can't be what I'm here for. This cannot possibly be life. But when I looked around and saw other women and I saw images and magazines, like it seemed like that was what it was. Like that is what it was to be a woman, to always be efforting just to exist.
Melissa Toller is a body image coach and a writer. After being a chronic dieter and even a competitive bodybuilder, which we'll hear more about in a later episode, she started asking, why? Why are women like this? Why do we want, in air quotes, to be dieting or exercising or efforting, as Melissa called it, all the time? It comes down to the message. It's everywhere. But where does the message come from?
The obsession with weight loss and intense fat phobia is insidious, is pervasive. We believe it feels normal because we see it everywhere all the time. And so you almost have to bombard yourself with the opposite to slowly get out of that way of thinking. And I think for most people, it's not an easy process. It's not a quick process. Yes, maybe there's some things that you read or heard that flip the switch on for you, but then there's still work that happens after that. And so where I am now is I'm completely anti-diet. I don't sell weight loss, and I haven't for like a year or so. And I'm very clear about that. I'm still, there's still a voice inside my head that is like, well, maybe you should go to the gym 5 days this week. Maybe you should start lifting every day. Maybe you should. And so I hear that voice, but I don't act on it. So I don't know if the voice ever goes away, but my voice is still there telling me that you could be leaner. It's summertime. And these are things I don't believe. Like I write about like the whole, you don't have to be slim for summer. Like you just don't. And, but there's still a little voice that says, hey, well, you could probably be X amount of pounds slimmer, but I don't listen to that voice. And one thing, I am not triggered by like weight loss ads or seeing other people. That's so I can read stuff and look at stuff and not it doesn't take me over the edge. But there is sometimes a little voice in my head, but I acknowledge and then I move on.
You know, it's interesting because, you know, I feel like I'm not triggered by the weight loss ads anymore, the diet ads. But at the same time, I think that's where the voice comes from, you know?
Yeah.
You know, because this wasn't an idea, like, I don't know. I mean, maybe it was just an organic idea that came out of like being in a body, but I feel like there's so much of, we're so surrounded all day long by images, by messages, by people who are doing this diet, or, you know, your company's hosting a fitness challenge, or the magazines even in the rack as you're checking out, you know, and it becomes almost like you become numb to it, but at the same time, subliminally in a way, you're kind of picking up all of these signals and just collecting them and holding them as information. And then, you know, it comes out as, oh, this was my idea.
Yeah, like I can stand in criticism of the ridiculous diet. Like I was at the nail salon yesterday and I saw an Us Weekly magazine where there were the stars give you their diet tips, and the word diet was in large font, and I just read it and I was just like, this is all so ridiculous. And I just was like, I can't even make it through these 20 tips, and I just put it down.
Well, it's funny because they're all always exactly the same.
Same nonsense.
Yeah. I don't know how many times we can read drink more water before it becomes less interesting. And also more useful because, drink water, but that has nothing to do with your weight loss. But anyway. The other day, I saw a post on Facebook that led me to an article about the newest thing that women were feeling self-conscious about. Do you want to know what that thing was? Wait for it. Armpit vaginas. Yes, you heard that right. You do not need to adjust the volume on this podcast. Armpit vaginas. Apparently, when you wear a bra or a certain kind of top, it pushes up the skin around your chest and sometimes creates a little crease between your breast and the armpit that looks, if you zoom in on the photo, like a labia. And this was a new trend that women, especially stars on the red carpet, were worrying about and getting plastic surgery to correct. The reason that I mentioned this ridiculous thing is that I had never in my life ever considered that little pinch of skin near my armpit. And all of a sudden, after reading just the headline, I was thinking about it. Even though I don't give a damn what it looks like on my own body, I was just suddenly aware of it. This is how it happens. A mention, a photo, a tie-in with a celebrity. Suddenly you're seeing the message everywhere. Your body isn't good enough. You should be working harder to make it better, different, thinner, more tight, toned, and taut. The articles and blogs and Facebook and Instagram posts feel like an imperceptible avalanche. You see and hear a message everywhere until you are so buried that you don't even realize you've been suffocated. Why, all of a sudden, are people interested in the keto diet? Is it because keto is truly the best diet, or just because everyone is writing about it? Why are people all of a sudden talking about bikini bodies come May? Is it because this is what we're supposed to be worried about in the run-up to summer? Or did someone manufacture summer as bikini body season so they'd have something to write an article about? It feels really inevitable once that little worm has been placed in your ear. You know, you should look this up. You should know how to fix this. You should be buying a supplement or an exercise program or a corset or makeup or something to fix the thing you just heard about. You need a coach, a doctor, a holistic nutritionist, a cookbook. All because the media that you've been surrounded with every single day is constantly looking for new things to write about, so you'll keep coming to their website so the advertisers can sell to you so the writers can get paid. They need to keep confirming your beliefs that you are not enough and you are too much, and they will do that so long as they can find new things to keep you picking yourself apart, like armpit vaginas, while feeding you the promise that quick fixes abound. It also doesn't help that many of the writers and marketers who are helping you discover the next thing to worry about are a part of this culture and may also already have a pretty messed up relationship with food, fitness, and body image themselves. To that end, I talked to my friend Christy Harrison, who's a registered dietitian and a body image coach, as well as the host of the Food Psych podcast, because she knows all too well how this sort of thing gets perpetuated and spread.
I started out as a journalist about 14 years ago. That was my first career. And, journalism has gone through some real upheavals in the last, 20 years, right? So I was sort of right on the cusp of when online journalism was becoming a thing. I started out working at print newspapers and magazines and then transitioned into online. And so I ended up specializing in food writing. I also had my own eating disorder history. So actually at the time that I was starting my career, I was really struggling with restriction and binging and, really in it with all that stuff. So I kind of became attracted to food as a beat to cover and ended up working at a food magazine called Gourmet that many people may know. Rest in peace. So I was there until the end. They closed it in 2009, and I worked there for 2.5 years as their online editor. And so as that was sort of, there were rumblings that something was going to happen. There were going to be big layoffs or potentially folding the magazine, right? So all this stuff was happening sort of in response to the financial crisis of 2008. And so I started to reflect on what I wanted to do with my life potentially other than journalism, because there was so much upheaval and change happening in that industry. And because of my history and, as a food writer and sort of immersing myself in that world, I sort of cobbled together a recovery, and I did eventually get therapy that really helped get at the underlying issues with my eating. But I was still, somewhat disordered about food at the time when I started considering going back to school to become a dietitian. And I was covering food and nutrition. I was writing a lot about food politics. So I thought, master's of public health nutrition might be an interesting path to go down, and, to help me write about, systemic issues with the food system and maybe potentially work in policy. So I ended up working for the City Department of Health in nutrition policy as my first nutrition jobs. And, I decided I also wanted to get the RD to potentially do individual counseling or just have the credential after my name to be an expert source and write books and stuff like that.
I think you have a really unique perspective, especially coming from the journalism world. You have to have something to write about, right? I'm actually really curious, while you were still in journalism, specifically food journalism, how did you find your stories?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would subscribe to news alerts about various topics. I would read voraciously, just try to read everything that other people were writing about food. And when I covered nutrition, this is the thing that's a little problematic about nutrition journalism that I always like to highlight, is when I covered nutrition, I would subscribe to these news briefs that were new studies every day, basically delivered into your inbox that had just sort of absurd conclusions or headlines, or, some of them were very titillating, right? These studies that we see, like chocolate, gives you cancer or whatever, like the completely off the wall things, that was coming into my inbox every day. And when I started out in journalism, I had no idea how to read a study or how to understand whether a study was valid or the results could be generalized to the population. And so, some of my editors were a little more versed in that stuff than I was, but not by a whole lot. Like most people who are journalists don't go through a research methods program unless maybe they did a science journalism program in school or something like that. But I wasn't really working in science journalism. A lot of the people I was working with had been in food their entire careers, or, I started out with working in an environmental magazine, and a lot of the folks there had been writing about, science and the environment from a sort of techie perspective, but not like health journalists, right? And so I never really learned how to determine what was a good study to report on or not. And I would just sort of say hey, this is interesting, what do you guys think, to my editors? And people would be like, oh yeah, that's super cool. Write something up and let's post it,
Currently, I'm part of Cision, which is a public relations platform for journalists and PR folks. And what that does is it connects you. So when I was podcasting about food, I was like, well, this is great because maybe I'll find some new sources, right? As a technically not really a journalist, but as a quote unquote journalist with my podcast, right? I would get PR briefs from people with books for me to read or stories that they wanted to come on the show and talk about. And then I could just respond to whichever PR press release came through and potentially have a new source. I'm still part of it, but now I just use it for the absurdity. I get a slew of press releases in my inbox every single day, and all of them are problematic. Like, all of them. And it's one of the things that's really interesting to me about public relations and the way that it affects journalism, which then trickles down into the online world, which then trickles into the way that we talk to each other on our social platforms, which then trickles into the things that you have to coach people about, is that there is... in public relations, it seems like there's kind of an Ouroboros, like snake eating its tail thing, where it's like, well, because it's bikini body season, I have to write about bikini body season. So I'll tie my product thing, whatever, into bikini body season so that journalists will see bikini body season and know that this is a story that's relevant to them. And then they can then write about it, which then reinforces that bikini body season is even a thing. Right? Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yes. Yeah. I saw that all the time too. And because it was the same thing. I was subscribed to a lot of PR, services. And then people would also public relations firms would discover that I was writing about a certain beat, or I would meet them at an event or something like that. And so then I get on these lists for press releases for everything under the sun. And it was very much that. It was sort of like, and it was sometimes really far-fetched stuff too, like, the National Almond Day or whatever, just like very silly things that no one would ever take seriously. But for something like bikini body season, it certainly is, culturally reinforced. And when you see, because we would also pay attention to what our competitors were up to. And when you see this magazine is doing a feature on this, right? Like that affects how you that might mean hey, we should do a feature on this, or we should at least be covering this because it's something that people in this niche seem to want.
Yeah. And that's it right there. So the crux of marketing psychology, of public relations / propaganda, because that is actually what public relations is, from a historical standpoint, is the focus is on, quote unquote, what people actually want. Right. So what happens is a journalist gets a story and is like, well, I don't know how I feel about bikini body season. Right. But they post it anyway. Right. And they get tons and tons of clicks. So that validates, oh, it must be that this is what people want. Oh, people want weight loss. People want miracle cures. People want, moon juice and wellness. Right. But at the same time, it's like, well, they want it because they've been shown that they should want it, right? And so they don't know any better. And from a psychology standpoint, yeah, if you show somebody something that's a miracle versus something that is mildly interesting, they're going to click on the miracle, right? That's how clickbait works, right? They want the most extreme example. So as a journalist, as a public relations professional, as even just a blogger, right? We have to make that decision day in, day out. Do I write the thing that's going to get more people to my stuff? Or do I write the thing that is maybe morally and ethically less reprehensible? And instead we choose to go for the reprehensible stuff or the easy low-hanging fruit or whatever you want to call it, because it's quote unquote what people want. But it's only what people want because we've already reinforced it culturally. So if it's not a part of the culture, then we don't need to want it. You know what I mean? I don't think anybody naturally wants weight loss. There were not early Homo sapiens worrying about their waistlines, right? There really weren't even people up until, we're talking I don't know, probably within the last 2 centuries that were really talking about diets as a culture-wide thing, And yes, food itself, we can talk about all the problems systemically with food and, oh, yes, it's making people sick, blah, 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 big pharma, big ag, whatever. But, at its core, people don't want weight loss. People have been taught to want weight loss.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It is that snake eating its tail thing, right? Of like, well, we have to write about weight loss because people want weight loss. Why do people want weight loss? It's because we're writing about weight loss. Like
Exactly. And it's crazy making.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. And it's one of the things that makes it very difficult then when you leave journalism or whatever and go and become the blogger that you are, the podcaster, to then create a business telling people that that's not what they want. So when women drop out to become coaches, and again, I'll talk about why they might want to do that in a future episode, they go where the money is, the path of least resistance. I chose to become a health coach because I was already obsessed with fitness and nutrition. I was paleo at the time after having been a vegan and a bodybuilder. I had a personal trainer certification, and I was thin, although I believed not lean and fit enough. Becoming a health coach, nutrition guru, personal trainer, or someone who works with bodies means being seen, especially on the internet. I had to be visibly lean and muscular to sell fitness to other people. I had to be visibly healthy, free from acne and traces of fat, cellulite, and other normal human things in order to convince people that I was the kind of person who could sell them a diet and a lifestyle that would optimize their health. People were, I believed, counting on me to visually represent what they wanted to become. I had to be consumable. My brand promise was the fodder that would replace the calories that they weren't eating. And I got trapped into the belief that I still had more work to do. Here's Suki again.
It's an interesting line to walk as a person who works, whether it's health coaching or weight loss coaching or, in my field, posture, movement, that people look at your body a lot. And so that's another piece of the brand. When you go to my website, there's pictures of me on there. And I definitely do have some discomfort with, it's something I think about a lot is that, why am I presenting myself in such a way, down to like, what clothes am I wearing and why am I wearing these clothes? And, how am I doing my hair and should I wear makeup? And, for me, I'm very tall. So, I work with people who are professionals. And one thing I consider a lot is like, should I wear heels? And I think about this a lot because, in my opinion, I don't like heels. They're not good for your feet. They're not good for your body. I don't tell people they can't wear them, but they're kind of like dessert, so I don't like people wearing them all the time. But there's definitely, if you go into a corporate space and you are a woman, I notice that women who wear heels, have an aura of power around them because it's a cultural thing, right? So I think that in the marketing of any body-centered thing, there can be some trouble with figuring out how to present yourself and how to be in integrity with your ideals while still, again, meeting the client where they're at and being in an acceptable place for them. And I think for, if you're in the coaching field at all, and especially around weight loss, it is really a challenge because I think we've been taught, I know I heard it a lot, that you don't want to follow a coach who hasn't mastered the thing that you want to master, right? So if you're trying to lose weight, you don't want to follow a coach who's overweight. Like that, I've heard that so many times. And it makes logical sense, but it also doesn't make sense. So it's an interesting question. And I think it's one that if we are marketing in a health or body-centered field, we need to be really intentional. So I may wear makeup and get my eyebrows done. And I know why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because it allows me access to people who are in spaces where I see a need for the kind of work that I'm doing. And I see that the greater benefit is that I'm getting into those spaces and doing the work and that it will have ripple effects. If I can work with an entrepreneur or an executive and get him in a more regulated space or her in a more regulated space, then the people around that person are going to also feel the benefits. They're going to have a safer, more trustworthy leader. It's going to make our workspaces less toxic. So can I can I get my hair done and my eyebrows and put on some makeup and buy some fancy clothes for that? Yeah, I can make that compromise. But I'm doing it intentionally, right? I'm not just doing it sort of unconsciously, not knowing how I'm playing into the culture.
Unlike Suki, I was not making intentional compromises in my marketing. I was marketing what I thought people wanted, what I thought I wanted. Perhaps what you think you want too. You know, if I were to ask you what you think of when you think of a popular Instagram influencer or blogger or health coach, what does that person look like? All right, so I can't hear you talking back to me over your car radio or your AirPods, so I'll answer for you. It's a she, and she is femme. Maybe blonde, but definitely put together. She gets her hair done, her nails done, her to-do list done, her life done. Even when she posts a no-makeup selfie, she still looks like she's stepped out of a magazine. Her skin is flawless because of the supplements she takes, or the oil cleansing regimen she just started, or the brand of natural face cream she's repping. If she has children, she's the perfect mother. If she has a partner, always a husband, she gives him a cute name like Mr. Oatmeal or Mr. Skinny Bitch. He takes the pictures for her and sometimes helps her with her yoga poses. And she is fit or thin or lean or toned, depending on what her brand tells you that she must be. She's flexible but strong. She did it through progress, not perfection. But come to think of it, you've only really seen the perfection. She is aspiration embodied, and her body is a commodity that you can buy if only you sign up for her next coaching series or purchase the exclusive supplement line that she's affiliated with. With a body like hers, your life could be just as beautiful as the one she shows you. You could be thin, toned, and empowered.
And, you know, weight loss is often sold as empowerment. And that makes me want to rip my eyebrows out when I hear that. Because it's, you know, dieting to lose weight is probably one of the most disempowering things that you can do. And so when I see women specifically selling to other women, you know, empowerment, which is, sidebar, like one of the fluffiest words these days, because empowerment has sort of become something that you just sell tickets to. It's really meaningless. When I see that, I'm just like, this is not empowering. It isn't. When you hand over the keys to your body and your life to someone else to tell you what to eat and what to do and how to spend your time trying to shrink yourself, you lose your power. It's not empowering at all. And yeah, I want people to realize that. And, you know, I started to think about this when I saw someone who is pretty well known in the internet space, who's like a money mindset coach selling weight loss. And, you know, she, in her regular business, talks about financial empowerment and empowering women, but then turns around and sells something that is not empowering at all. And I've seen that in the past month. I've seen that 3 times from 3 different people.
Let's jump back to our conversation with Christy Harrison. I was actually targeted with an ad on Instagram the other day that I posted on Facebook. I have an album on Facebook of terrible marketing pitches, which I just screenshot basically everything that I get from Cision and Instagram and Facebook every day. But one of the screen caps that I took was this ad on Instagram for a woman who is pretty clearly a Beachbody coach. But Beachbody has a very specific marketing plan that they give to their people. So, but this person was targeting me, and in all caps, she was highlighting that she was looking for women who were driven and wanted to live on their own terms so that they could be better mothers and wives and, you know, be able to still have time for their family while they're working. Like, this was the message that she was. And so the entire sales pitch was, which, you know, yes, you should be able to have work-life balance, I think is a good message. But the way that she pitched it was not work-life balance. It's you can still make money, but you're a great mom and a great wife. You are going to live up to all of the heteronormative ideals while also having, quote unquote, your own terms, right? the pitch was for you to become a Beachbody coach, of course, because, now it doesn't say that, but because Beachbody coaches never put that they do Beachbody on their profiles. They just say, sign up for my next cycle of coaching. Yeah, it's very deceptive marketing. It drives me up a wall. The point is, your marketing is not saying by doing this, you will reach the hetero norm.
Right.
Right. And yes, it is targeted probably more towards people who identify as femme, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably people who are cisgender women might resonate with your message specifically because that is who you are and that is the experience that you have.
Right.
Doesn't mean that you cannot work with people who are outside of that, but your marketing is an activism. You have to pick a niche,
mm-hmm.
right? Like this is a thing that I am constantly saying. You do have to pick a niche, and unfortunately, niching is not inclusive, even though you are inclusive in the voices that you center on your podcast.
Right.
But so I will say of your marketing, it doesn't reach that scary sort of cis heteronormative white aspiration, if you will, because I think that's what happens in the body image world. It's like, there is a coach that I used to highly respect, who's gone from coaching about body image to coaching about regaining your femininity.
Right.
And it's all about, and there's nothing wrong with identifying as femme and embracing those femme qualities if that is a thing that appeals to you.
Sure.
It's just that the language of it tends towards the cis heteronormative, tends towards the disempowering under the guise of empowerment.
Right.
It tends toward relieving you of your duties of taking control of your own destiny and just like, well, as long as you can perform this, you've done it.
Right.
Right. Anyway, sorry, that's a tangent, but
no, that's so important and interesting. I think because like what you're saying, the aspirational thing, right? It's the female lifestyle empowerment brand is sort of
yes,
which is Kelly Deals' term for this sort of type of marketing, right? That's like centering white, cis, able-bodied, heterosexual, usually young women, and showing this aspirational life that people want, sort of people are told they should want to attain at least. And then saying that you can have this too if you do my coaching program or if you buy my product or whatever it is. And yeah, that is so problematic and just so not me that I think that has been a consistent thing that I've had to just listen to my intuition about of like, where am I getting pressure to be aspirational and like sell something that I don't even believe in really, the work is not about that, right? Work is a separate sphere that can, support a family for sure, but not like it just, it's sort of like gaslighting almost to say like, you can live life on your own terms and be empowered in order to, right, perform this role that women have been forced into for millennia. And it's only, in the last century or so that we've had some options outside of that, right?
Right. And, and that is how we sell diets, because if you accept that the role of a woman, obviously I say woman and there's so much baggage attached to that word, but let's just talk in general terms, right? The role of a cisgender heterosexual woman is to be a wife, to be a mother, and to also embody, it's like to embody, youth and sex and desirability, objectification, and also to embody mother and home and, the sense of like Puritan values, right?
Yeah.
And there's a huge, this is why dieting is a thing, because it's like, okay, if you are intended to have to, embody all of these things, well, you have to look a certain way, you have to be desirable. And again, this is an Ouroboros situation, the snake eating its own tail, where it's like, well, right, but why do you have to do that? It's just because we've been told that, not because we came up with this concept organically.
Right.
Right. But yeah, it's all about like trying to control your body so that you can be consumed.
Right.
Right. in a way that is pleasurable for, ostensibly a cisgender heterosexual male.
Right.
And of course, then that language has now trickled into non-heteronormative relationships. I know, there's a huge pressure for gay men to have their bodies look a certain way, right? And there's huge pressure on everyone in order to avoid being harassed, misgendered, having violence committed against them to look a certain way as well.
Right.
And so it's just like that language of like, cisgender women must look a certain way has trickled into everything.
Totally.
And as marketers, it's so easy to take that and say, well, because it is this way, let me help you feel better by doing this,
right.
And I'll have you do it in a way that feels more palatable to you, right? We'll call it body positivity. We'll call it empowerment. We'll call it this, that, and the other thing to make you feel like doing this is giving you something that you want or need.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, when you perform this, no matter what, you are doing something that is perpetuating violence against your own body.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's like the people who say intuitive eating is a way to have the weight just effortlessly fall off, right?
No.
Intuitive eating is about rejecting the diet mentality, about accepting your body wherever it lands. And oftentimes, if you've been dieting and restricting, that's going to be at a higher weight than you started out with. Some people might lose weight, some people gain weight, some people stay the same. But people who market themselves as intuitive eating coaches who help you lose weight in a quote, healthy, gradual way or whatever, just drive me up a wall because it's completely misunderstanding what intuitive eating is. And it's almost like, did you even read the book? Because it's in the book. Like if you read the book, you would know it's not about achieving a certain body size,
Yeah, exactly. But from a marketing perspective, from a PR perspective, because the snake has eaten its own tail for so long, it's very hard to convince people that that is not correct.
Right. And that's not something they should want.
And one more jump back to our conversation with Melissa Toller. It's so interesting because I think we both kind of came to this conclusion on like in weird opposite bubbles of the world. But the idea of dieting being violence against the body, you know what I mean? And so I want to talk a little bit about that and kind of what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to that voice that I always heard that was deep inside of me that said, this is not right. This can't be it. This doesn't make sense that I'm always trying to eat less to weigh less. And so in late 2015, I read a post written by Rachel Cole, and it was just simply titled "Dieting is a Violent Act." And when I tell you, I was like, that post just clicked and confirmed everything that little voice inside of me had been saying. And she just laid it out, how dieting is physically violent, emotionally violent, mentally violent. And if you've ever been on a diet or done something to intentionally lose weight, you can relate to that. And dieting is really, it encourages us to go against ourselves on a regular basis. It encourages us to hate our bodies as they are and fix them. It encourages us to eat less, even if we want more. It encourages us to work out harder and go into quote unquote beast mode, even when we are sick or tired or injured. It is violence. And this is how powerful diet culture is. And so I read that and I was like, yes, this is what I've been thinking. And she just put it into words. But then I was like, well, is violence too strong of a word? Maybe that's too much. And then I realized that's how insidious diet culture is, right? It has you thinking, well, it's not that bad. And you think that because it's everywhere. Like, so it can't be that bad because everyone else is doing it. And so that was my thought process over, and now I am convinced that it is a violent thing. It just is. I mean, we live here in America in a culture where food is prevalent. We have a lot of food, but then we intentionally don't eat what we want. I mean, just it's a very violent process. And for me as a Black woman, there's so many things in this culture that tell me that I'm not okay. And this is one of them. And I cannot participate in that. I just know, now that I know what I know, I cannot participate in that. It is not healthy. And, and that's, despite what people say about the health and wellness industry, it's really not about health or wellness. It is about selling stuff to help you lose weight. And wellness is not directed, it's only directed towards certain people. It's as if certain people, if you can't afford it, you look a certain way, you don't deserve to be well. So it's the whole community to me is very empty and manipulative and individualistic. There's like no conversation around access to health care, health insurance, food. I could go on and on about that. That's been something that's been burning a hole in my rear end.
Yeah. Well, please feel free. This is your space.
Yeah, just, it's not healthy for me to go against myself. It's not healthy for me to think there's something wrong with me all the time. None of that is healthy, but it's sold to me. It's sold to us as healthy. It's not healthy to think that I'm somehow superior to people who aren't or can't get as lean as I can get. Like that just is, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But that is what health and wellness has become. It's become about green juice, detoxing, yoga on a mountaintop. And it's all directed toward young white women, right?
Yeah.
It just is. Like that is what health and wellness is about. And let me just tell you, when it just really became clear, here in America, the House of Representatives voted for the repeal and replacement of Obamacare, and there's a potential for millions of Americans to lose their health insurance. So do you think that any of these health and wellness gurus, leaders, or advocates, or whatever they call themselves, the same people who were in an uproar about the sugar content of that unicorn frappuccino didn't say jack shit about about the health insurance situation? So it's very clear that they have a narrow view of what health and wellness actually means and who should benefit from it. So that's why I struggle with using the term health and wellness coach, even though that is an official term that I got certified for. I don't want to be associated with the state of the health and wellness community as it is now.
I 100% agree. I stopped calling myself a health coach a long time ago for that specific reason. It's like, well, nobody knows how to find me now. Great.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's very clear that even when people, there are some wonderful people in the health and wellness community who have helped people get healthy, right? Who are dealing with like specific things that are very bad for your health, whatever, and they're motivating people and inspiring them or whatever. But at the same time, when you say that it's empty and manipulative and individualistic, you're right. Because at the end of the day, it's about generating more wealth from somebody else's fear of being broken.
Yes.
I left the paleo world when I saw that happening. Because I would look at my friends who, so the way that I saw it, right? Okay, so you get started in paleo because you saw, somebody with a 6-pack, right? It's usually a white woman who does CrossFit or a white man who does CrossFit, or they don't call it CrossFit. They do like body weight exercises and sprints or something, right? Mm-hmm. And you see this image of the 6-pack. And actually, I can tell you, if you're familiar with Abel James at all. But I remember a couple of years ago, he wrote a blog post about how he had written an article about health, and he had A/B tested the article. And one version of the article he put on social media had a picture of him with a six-pack, and the other version had a picture of kale. And guess which one got clicked more?
His six-pack?
Heck yeah. So, so what happens is they market like eating a little bit better, or like even the people who are into sustainability and stuff, they market it as weight loss, or they market it as muscles so that they can get you in, because culture's already put that voice in your head, right? That there's something wrong with you. So you just get in and you're like, oh, okay, I'll just like maybe eat a little bit less bread and like maybe eat a little more veggies. But by the end of it, I mean, I look at the panels at Paleo FX this year and I'm like, I'm ready to cry, because it's like we get down to this point where it's like you have to continue to convince people that they are broken, that they're not. So they get you from like eat a little bit less bread and a little bit more veggies to like now you're taking supplements to detox parasites that might be in your toenail or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's all sold with a six-pack.
Yes.
And it's all sold with a white six-pack. It is so. It blows my mind that we can't see it.
Yes. Yeah, we can't see it. It's really difficult to see that there's something wrong with that, because we're surrounded by it, because we've been surrounded by it for our entire lives. So you have to, it's almost impossible to withdraw from that because you don't see it as a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And so like when somebody like, you or I comes up and says, hey, that thing you're doing, it's a little bad. Same thing with the fitness stuff, right? The bodybuilding stuff. When somebody says like, yeah, maybe, selling weight loss, maybe not such a good thing. People are like, oh, how dare you? How dare you take that away from me when this is my calling?
Yes. Yes.
Oh. How dare you take that away from me when I'm helping millions of people to feel better about themselves? When in reality, are you really helping them feel better about themselves, or are you helping them feel superior while they're in the middle of hating themselves?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like a salve to, cool the burn of that self-hatred. Because at the end of the day, I hate myself so much that I've made myself better. How did we get here? How did self-hate turn into a message of empowerment? I interviewed Andy Zeisler, editor of Bitch magazine and author of We Were Feminist Once, From Riot Girl to Cover Girl, because I thought if anyone had the answers, she would.
There's an amazing writer named Susan J. Douglas who has a number of books on sort of pop culture, and she's sort of been like a mentor of mine. And one of the things she's written about is in a book she wrote called Where the Girls Are, and it was sort of about growing up with popular culture geared toward women, sort of as the ambient white noise of her life. And one of the things she talked the kind of sort of pre-feminist backlash years of sort of like the late 70s, and this idea that a kind of narcissism began to stand in for feminism, because the narrative was that, for, at least white, middle class, somewhat educated women, the feminist movement had really achieved so many of its goals. It had secured the legal abortion. It had secured, things like the Equal Credit Act. It had secured a lot more protections in the workplace. So there was this idea that feminism had really done a lot of what people had hoped it would do. And so there came in the aftermath kind of this much more consumerist focus on, well, now that you're liberated, what are you going to do with that? And, so we had like the Jane Fonda workout where, this former anti-war feminist leaning activist was like, feel the burn, because your body is the next frontier of liberation. That was very true of the 80s as a whole, in the sense of it, was the decade where people really took a breath after, the post-civil rights, post-gay liberation, post-second wave movement, and people began to be really into themselves and began to, concentrate on what felt good to them, and, sort of rationalized it as, well, we worked hard, we marched, we suffered, we, hunger striked. This is our time. And so, I wouldn't trace all of it to that, but I do think that put in place this mindset where it became very easy to conflate sort of social movements with personal power.
I look at all this, and one of the things that happened to me, and I see this happening to a lot of the women who became my clients or listened to my previous podcast, which was all about eating disorder recovery, even for people who didn't have eating disorders, but had all of the behaviors. There is a sense of accomplishment and of righteousness and of, I guess empowerment, if that's the word I have to use, by controlling your body, and being able to gain cultural capital as a result. I personally had a family member who never had a nice thing to say about me tell me when I was, under 100 pounds that I finally looked good. And that was the first compliment she'd ever given me. I started gaining, my very first boyfriend happened the same summer that I became an anorexic. And so I see this happening. It's being taught now to people who don't have eating disorders, you look at the Beachbody coaches and Isogenics and Advocare and all of the MLM companies and all of the diets and the fitness, CrossFit. It's all about masculinizing your body in a lot of ways, or ultra feminizing your body. There's kind of like that two, and I use those binary words knowing that they're kind of bullshit descriptors, but just for the sake of conversation. There's this sense that either strong is the new skinny or healthy is the new skinny. And both of these things are constantly about making choices to change your body and bring that focus completely narcissistically inward to optimize and change so that you can then present yourself to the world for some sort of cultural, exchange of cultural or financial capital, right?
One of the places where it's really hard to sort of parse all of this stuff about, empowerment and liberation and, individual success versus collective success really is the body, and particularly for women, because, so much of our socialization has really been tied up in our bodies, and our bodies have been equated with our value, our worth, our ability to love and be loved, our ability to be seen. And so that's a really hard place. And I feel like that's one of the hugest sort of sites of people having these kind of crises about whether they can truly act in a feminist way if they sort of buy into so much of anti-feminist rhetoric when it comes to themselves. And, I struggle with it too. I'm doing a sugar detox right now, and I want to face plant into a vat of ice cream. But I also am like, oh my God, I'm filming this segment of a documentary next week, and I hope I hope my face looks thinner. You know what I mean? We all do this. And it does feel like in a feminist world that wouldn't happen. But I kind of wonder.
I wonder too. I wonder what a feminist world would look like. One where we didn't have to constantly think about how our looks impact our ability to sell. One where feminist experts don't have to think about what their bodies communicate to others. One where we don't have to sell each other diets and thinness and over-exercise under the guise of empowerment. But I suppose before we begin imagining that world, we have to start by understanding why we're looking for empowerment in the first place. Today's episode was written, recorded, edited, and produced by me, Kyla Tova. Dramaturgical feedback was provided by Kendall Lynch. Music for the intro was written and produced by Mackenzie Quattlebaum. And thank you to the Silicon Valley chapter of Shut Up and Write for hours and hours and hours of quiet and sometimes loud companionship, and for listening to me talk about this podcast for the last year and a half. To support this independent, ad-free podcast and to help us develop a season 2, please consider becoming a patron. Patrons who pledge $5 a month or more will get exclusive audio, including cut audio and longer, previously unreleased interviews. Just visit patreon.com/bodybrandpod. For show notes and links to guests on today's episode, please visit bodybrandpod.com, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Are you a health coach, yoga teacher, personal trainer, or wellness entrepreneur? Have you considered becoming one? I'd love to hear your story and potentially share it on a future podcast. Or do you have a question? Well, you can send me a text email, or better yet, record a voice memo and email it to yourbodyyourbrand@gmail.com. Or you can connect with me on Twitter @bodybrandpod. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.